welcome to Rev Televised. It's been a while, so thanks for joining us if you're watching. We've got a bunch of stuff to go over. I've got Karsh and Eddie on the hangout with me. Hey guys.
How's it going?
Hey,
It's good. Just a slow Sunday. Yesterday we had a march that is making huge waves. We're going to talk about that. Before we talk about the march and gun violence and the surrounding discussion there, we are just going to have a few meta updates. We've got a lot to announce. We've got some upcoming AMAs and elections. You want to go over those, Karsh?
yeah, sure. So we have this coming Tuesday, just in a couple of days, Saira Rao. She's running in our home state, Colorado, as 1st District for U.S. Congress. That's going to be this Tuesday, March 27th, from 3 to 5 Mountain Time. And then we have Bob Massey just a couple days later. He's running for governor of Massachusetts. He'll be here on Thursday, March 29th. And then we kind of have an up-in-the-air AMA right now. We're talking with Sean Carrigan, but we do want to kind of jump in and see more about his candidacy, and that's still to be decided. And that's rounding out March. We'll have some more things going into April, and we're kind of working on programming there in the background. So we'll let you know in the next update, so keep your kind of eyes peeled on that calendar. Beyond that, there's some elections as well coming up. I'll throw that back to you, Glow.
Okay. We don't have, we just had some really big primaries on March 20th. We didn't do coverage for that, but really quickly, we did have some wins. We had Jesus Garcia in Congressional District 4, so congratulations. He was endorsed by ourselves as well as Our Revolution. For State House District 103, we had Carol Ammons, who did win, also endorsed by OR and PR. And then for Cook County Assessor, we had Fritz Kaigi, also endorsed by Our Revolution and us. And then last but not least, Brandon Johnson for Cook County Legislative District 1. So we are now seeing more and more progressives winning in these off seasons, and that's just following the trend of that. And we do have our the next election is Alabama special election for State House District 21 on March 27th. But our next big set of primaries and elections isn't until April 3rd. We have several elections happening there in Massachusetts, Missouri, Rhode Island, Wisconsin, California, and California. There's also a ballot measure for Wisconsin. You can view the full details for that in the election calendar. The only candidates it looks like that we've endorsed for those races right now is in the primary in California. For State House District 45, we've endorsed Ankura Patel. And for State House District 54, we've endorsed Steve Durwordy. So again, you can see all of those election dates on the election wiki on the Reddit site, and then as well as on the elections calendar on the website. And then speaking of AMAs and elections, we just wanted to also recap. We had an Ask Me Anything with Kanielia Ng.
Kanyela. I think it's Kanyela.
Okay.
Mm-hmm.
He is running for Hawaii District, Hawaii District 1. He's currently actually an incumbent for the State House District 11, I believe. But his Ask Me Anything did extraordinarily well. It got over 22,000 views on our subreddit, and we cross-posted it to our IMA, which is the main Ask Me Anything subreddit, and it got over 120,000 views. And it was kind of a slow burn, if you will, because we posted it late on Wednesday night, around 8 p.m. or no, 6 p.m. Eastern, and it rose throughout the night. And we actually, Kanielia um, came back and actually answered more questions. I guess, was really popular in super communist socialist, kind of like the extreme left factions. And we saw that bike also. We posted it in Chapo Trap House and it got good reception. So definitely popular. And if you look at the Ask Me Anything, his questions kind of, or his answers to the questions kind of speak for themselves. He's very educated on policy and he's very socialist in that regard as well. Just looking for like highlights.
You know what I'm going to do is I'm also going to throw a link to that interview he had with Chapo Trap House with Virgil in our YouTube video description, so people should check that out and definitely see what you're talking about, Chloe. His really intellectual debate regarding the policies, and that's what I think stood out a lot in this AMA.
Yeah, he's very young. He was elected when he was 23. And he was actually, before he was elected as the State House District 11 candidate, he was the vice chair on the State House Committee on Public Safety into 2014. So he's kind of just always been directly engaged in the community and in those discussions. So we just wanted to highlight that and kind of given a unique example on what the discussion can look like and the different types of avenues that we see for candidates, and really the benefit ultimately that candidates get out of having all that exposure. Yeah. Also in that vein, AMAs are one of the ways that we kind of vet candidates, and it really lends to whether we actually end up endorsing those candidates or not. More and more candidates are doing it. We usually, like today we had someone just post on the subreddit, and we were just kind of like, oh, hey, we noticed that you posted here. Why don't you email us for an Ask Me Anything? And then that puts them, already on the radar. And it allows them to showcase their candidate policy. And we just wanted to go over our most recent endorsements. We've been expanding our endorsements team more and more. Anybody can actually really be involved in that if you join our Slack, and it kind of is a very communal process where we, everybody kind of brings their information and their opinions to the table on these candidates, and then we vote, and that ultimately ends up on as a community endorsement. So most recently we endorsed, I'm just pulling it up really quickly.
And before you jump ahead, Glow, and one of our moderators on Political Revolution, Dead Poetic 31, actually posts weekly transparency threads about those endorsements. So there is a way to, we want to encourage the community to actually voice some of the endorsements that they are concerned about, that we are voting on all together as a community, so that it is in the open and that we have people, refuting some of the decisions that just our wiki kind of log team is, vetting on in our Slack. So come join us on Slack and be part of that process and get an entailed, document listing for all of the candidates that we want to endorse and vote on, and refute that if you don't agree also in the community. So look out for those endorsement transparency reports weekly from that moderator.
Yeah, absolutely. Thank you for that. So yeah, those are listed just on the subreddit weekly as well. They're usually pinned for a few days. But most recently we endorsed Priya Bhat Patel for Carlsbad, California City Council District 3. And then Sherrod Brown for U.S. Senator for Ohio. Mary Ann Clater for West Virginia State Senate District 17, and Chris Johnson for Delaware Attorney General. And we're currently voting on a slew of candidates right now. We've got Ayanna Presley, Ned Lamont, Suraj Patel, Chris Lee, Trent Nesmith, and Chris Rieger that we're voting on right now. We actually had an interesting discussion this morning about Suraj Patel. I don't know if we want to get into that, but it's just one of the things that kind of happens as we're, coming to the table with these things. And, we found an article about some comments that Suraj had made about young gymnasts, which was kind of creepy. So, yeah, and I think that's kind of leaning in the negative there, but you can be a part of that discussion and help do that vetting and that research and make sure that everything that we put out there is actually progressive. So yeah, so I think that's it for meta updates. Oh, we also did add Dennis Kucinich to the grassrootspb.com dialer, so you can phone bank for him as well. We've been coordinating with their campaign, and so far it's been going well. Definitely help get out the vote for him, and yeah, and win points and prizes. So, anyways, going back to the discussion about the March for Our Lives march from yesterday, as well as the impetus really leading up into this, which is the mass shootings that have been occurring in increasing intervals in America. And we're going to talk about Eddie. Eddie's actually involved in a lot of this. He was involved in the student walkouts and was one of the people who saw direct kind of the direct controversy and the resulting kind of actions by people who are involved in this, specifically, the school boards and the superintendents and how they're handling that. And some of them aren't handling that so well. And as well as we'll talk about I don't know what the word is, just some of the ignorance and the feedback from the NRA regarding these things. So yeah. We also are going to have, for the break, we have a really great video that Carl, our producer here, put together that showcases all the footage that we got, and it has some interviews from some people as well. So leading into that, I think, Eddie, you were actually at one of the marches yesterday.
And looks like Eddie might actually be a little bit off the hangout. Let's see if he's coming back on now. Yep.
Oh, could you hear me?
Yeah, there you go.
Okay, perfect. Yeah, sorry, my computer started freezing when we were talking about it. Yeah, so it's been, since the first announcement for the March for Our Lives and the walkouts that happened on the 14th of March and planned for April 20th. We've seen a lot of...
Hey, Eddie, I actually think, your audio is a little bit garbled again, so it might...
Yikes.
No worries.
Yeah, I'll rejoin. You think you could introduce us? Hello?
Okay.
Yeah. Cool.
Absolutely.
We'll be back.
But the March for Our Lives walkout was actually one of the largest walkouts, I think, and or even people. Well, there was an article from USA Today saying that it could be the biggest single-day protest in DC's history, and I know that Carl was actually, I think, at the DC one, and there's some really cool pictures floating around the internet about just how enormous that was and that show of solidarity. They estimate that there was 800,000 protesters at the gun control demonstration in Washington, D.C. It looks like Eddie's back. Can you hear me okay?
Yeah, I hope so now.
Yeah, your audio sounds great. So we were just saying there was about 800,000 people in DC. How many were where you were at about?
I haven't seen any estimates yet, but apparently it does match near to what the Women's March was in New York. We were in an overflow crowd on 87th Street, and apparently the furthest it went for the Women's March was 92nd. So we were we're pretty close. We started from Central Park and we ended at around 45th. Yeah, so it was a very long march with a lot of speaking. We had marching bands there. We joined a group of students, and we did see a bunch of hecklers.
Oh, really?
Yeah, as expected. Yeah, we saw one from InfoWars trying to,
Really?
yeah. He heard me ranting, so that after he started like started yelling at me. I'm just like, okay. He just started yelling like, so you don't think that our country is not going to be safe if we take away all of our guns? I'm like, no one wants to take away these guns, and that's what these people need to know. But again, these people are funded, whether they're contributors or people that are, I guess, I'm going to be really raw when I say this, but brainwashed enough to believe that we're trying to take away their guns. And this march is true, and I guess this march and future marches, along with the walkout on the 20th of April,
Yeah.
is trying to explain to them that this is not what we're trying to do. We're trying to do at least the utmost basic thing that should have been done a long time ago.
Right. I think I've been hearing that a lot too, where the NRA and some conservative like news media are kind of cherry picking the argument. There's certainly I think like some people that are just saying like gun owners are the problem and get away from ownership entirely, but I would say that the majority of people, and there's been polling done on this, the majority of people just want to decrease gun violence and do approve of background checks. And I think that's where we need to start, and that's not radical. That's something that, like you said, should have been done a long time ago. So I guess that's what I would say to that argument. It's that we're not, going after gun owners as a whole. We're going over, lives over ownership, right? And seeing that, the data, and historically, the U.S. has, the most gun violence, or one of the highest states with gun violence, over any other country. So that's what these walks are about.
Yeah, no, it is. Because no one's going to continue hearing, and we're going to be talking about this along with the NRA in a little bit later, and you already heard my basting about those comments. But again, it's back to what I said before. There are limits to everything. There are limits to our First Amendment. There are limits. I could read the Constitution right now, and I don't want to do that. But there's limits to all these. I'm telling you, I'm just going to be my little pocket Bible right here. But there's limits to all this. There's limits to the Fourth because of Section 215 of the Patriot Act. There's so much U.S. code that regulates automobiles, and that because they always keep saying we want to ban cars, but we don't, because I think we all know we need cars in our lives. And that car.
And Eddie, you talked about this, right? You talked about the Constitution during the National Student Walkout Day, right?
Yes. Yeah, I just haven't been able. Yeah, I wish I brought it with me to start throwing it around. But there's limits because our First Amendment, we can't do certain things. The Fourth Amendment, we already get searched. Probably the NSA is just like, what is this random Hispanic kid doing online? Put him on a list, but I doubt it. But what else? There's just so much. There's so much record showing that there's limits to all the amendments we have. Please, we have limits on alcohol and certain things. Because of the 21st Amendment, which allows us to do that. But apparently the Second Amendment, which is supposed to regulate firearms, but like muskets. We all don't use muskets anymore.
Carl sent me this note, like, while we were on the show. He's like, I always understood that the Second Amendment was all about slave-holding states being able to hunt down escaped slaves. And that's a really good point, too. I think that some of these, some of the laws were kind of made with these embedded ideas about ownership, right? And part of that is also owning human capital. And that is something to say, when you own a gun, you own the ability to take away human capital, kind of, or like, control that. And I think we just thinking about human as capital and thinking about lives as being optional is kind of like fucked up.
Yeah, it's the least Christian thing that these people keep saying. If we're such a Christian nation, this is not, this is anywhere but Christian. Because again, no one wants to take away your guns. is what these right wingers need to learn. Or it's what anyone needs to learn. We're not trying to take away guns. We're trying to do the most basic of things when it comes to ownership. Because if it takes me 1 to 2 years to get a license to drive in the state of New Jersey, I can go to Walmart in Pennsylvania. Not Pennsylvania. They're a little bit better. But I can go to one of these right winger states and just grab something, grab anything. I'm 17, so that'll be an issue. But maybe give it a few days, or like give it just like a little bit than 5 minutes. I'd be able to grab a firearm, and that's an issue.
You're absolutely right. I mean, I moved from Michigan, and it's we were seeing this kind of weird, like, equal and opposite effect in both communities with wealthy homes and as well as impoverished homes, in terms of the effects we're seeing on gun violence and kids being pulled into gangs and kids being influenced by drugs. It's like wealthy kids are kind of disillusioned and have all this pressure on them to like be put into like these high performing situations. And then I mean, my friend, I was in Novi, Michigan, and my friend one day, like, we come home after school and it's like, oh, look at this gun I picked up. Like, it's like a cool thing. Like, people can just own and collect guns for shits. Like, honestly, it was just like scary that like it's almost like 6 degrees of separation. But I mean, honestly, if you have a kid, or you have friends that have children, or brothers and sisters that have children, you are like, they are very likely to be exposed to the idea of owning a gun, or drug abuse in that regard. It's just a kind of a fact of how things are right now, and that's why students are walking out.
Yeah, because
I don't know why.
I'm sorry. No, in Maryland, where we just had a school shooting during the week, in the morning, where in Maryland, where one girl is dead. They pulled her off of life support a couple days ago because she was critically injured by a guy, by some random guy that grabbed his father's handgun and just opened fire. And it plays into the exposure thing, and that's what becomes an issue, because we forget that sometimes that these people already had guns to begin with. Now we just have to make sure that they don't get into the wrong hands, which is for these background checks, or it's for any type of licensing in general, or if it's simply just to make sure that, hey, put your gun somewhere where your kid can't find it, or like where your teenager, where your angsty teenage kid, I guess someone that is an angsty teen, it's like, that can't find, that they can't just easily grab your gun and open fire on their students. And kids are getting fed up, and they should be getting fed up. And if the NRA truly wants to defend the sanctity of life or weapons and just that, they would be standing with these kids. But no, they're standing for the manufacturers. They're standing for the people that don't want any change, because they get money every time people like me are gunned down, or anyone in general.
Yeah. With that, I want to, because I think we've been on air for about 15 minutes or so, and we've got a really great tape that I mentioned earlier about the walkout, and some tapes with that, as well as some interviews with people. So we can kind of segue into that, and then when we can come back, there's some data looking at how the U.S. compares internationally, and as well as kind of the changing mentalities on gun ownership with young people. And then we've got some, and then whatever else we decide to talk about, I don't know. So yeah.
Sounds good.
All right, let's cut the break.
This doesn't just happen in schools. Americans are being attacked in churches, nightclubs, movie theaters, and on the streets. But we, the people, can fix this. For the first time in a long while, I look forward 10 years and I feel hope. I see light. I see a system I'll be proud of, but it all starts with you. The march is not the climax of this movement, it is the beginning. It is the springboard off of which my generation and all who stand with us will jump into a safer future. Today is a bad day for tyranny and corruption. Today, we take to the streets in over 800 marches around the globe and demand common sense gun laws. Today is the beginning of a bright new future for this country. And if you think today is good, just wait for tomorrow. We must protect, educate, and inspire the future. And everybody here is proof that we will do that, and the future is looking very bright for this country. Thank you.
This is what democracy looks like. 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 Hey, hey, ho, ho. The NRA has got to go. Hey, hey, ho, ho. The NRA has got to go. Hey, hey, ho, ho. The NRA has got to go. Hey, hey, ho, ho. The NRA has got to go. Hey, hey, ho, ho. Donald Trump has got to go. Hey, hey, ho, ho. Donald Trump has got to go. Hey, hey, ho, ho. Donald Trump has got to go. And this is the last of it. This was the March for Our Lives in New York City. PR.
No more silence and gun violence!
No more silence and gun violence! No more silence and gun violence! No more silence and gun violence! No more silence and gun violence! No more silence
and gun violence! And for that we have each other. And for that we have each other. Yeah. We rise, we rise, we rise.
I am here because I was born in the age of mass shootings, and the fact that I have come to the age of 17 and I'll be 18 in May and nothing's been done in 18 years, that's a problem. So I'm here because I want to be a part of the generation that's going to make a change.
We have a voice, and it's a loud voice, and if we continue to talk about things that other people don't want to talk about, people will hear us.
Do you or anyone you know have an experience with gun violence?
Yeah, my English teacher, she's from Massachusetts, and she's actually been in a school shooting, and it's a very hard subject for her to talk about. One of my other previous English teachers was in the Virginia Tech college shooting, and it's, again, something very tough for her to speak about and have to live through.
I'm not gonna lie, today I was kind of scared to come to this march because I didn't know what would happen, but I prayed to God that everything will be okay. But just don't live in fear, because when we live in fear, we're not living at all.
11 years ago, I was next door to a public shooting where the perpetrator shot and killed a jewelry store owner and then himself. And I remember that day vividly of sitting down in the corner, not knowing what's going to happen next, and thinking about my family and exactly like what my legacy is going to be.
So you can really empathize with the kids in schools that are experiencing this.
I can, and I want just to let everyone know that even if they haven't had an experience like this, their voices should and can be heard.
I'm marching for everybody, all my friends at high school and high schools around the country, all the students who have already been killed, and all the students that I don't want to be killed, because I think we need gun control now to stop this epidemic, and not just in school shootings. Gun violence across America with just handguns is an incredibly huge problem too, and there hasn't really been a national conversation or a national uprising of people to protest gun violence, and I think that needs to change.
And I think that not enough people are voting, not enough people our age are voting. I know where I'm from that voting registration is everywhere, so there's really no excuse. You need to get out, you need to vote, and you need your voice to be heard.
To young people, I would just like to say that I know there's a lot of you all who feel like your vote doesn't matter. You know, it's just one little decimal point of a percentage, but it does matter. You guys are probably sitting down doing nothing anyway. Take a couple seconds to get registered. Take a day, not even a day, maybe 2 hours to go out and vote because it matters, and your vote can make the change. Your vote could be the difference between, you know, our safety, our protection, our comfort, and, you know, something else. So go out and make a change.
I would say that we really have the power to make a change. Like, we have such a huge social media influence, and I feel like we should be taking advantage of the amount of people that we can reach.
If I can sit in front of Congress, I tell them to get some courage and be sensible and pragmatic, because they're allowing people to die on their watch just because they want to stay in office. I know that their job is self-preservation, but their job is also to be courageous and lead our country. So they have to stand up to their donor base, and they have to make some change happen.
It's not okay that this is an issue that we even need to be fighting for. Every other country is already at a place where they have, you know, taken the measures they need to make sure that the people in their countries are safe. And the fact that we are so far behind the game is extremely upsetting. And what are you waiting for? It's important that we do this together. It's important that we are all standing together to do this. This is not something that is happening to other people. It's not something that is just like, it's extremely important to all of us. It could happen to any of us. And we will make a difference if we all speak together.
What would you like to say to Congress?
I would like to say that we need to start considering bills based on our population and not on interest groups like the NRA.
And to other young people?
You are significant. You can make a change. You just have to take the time to go out and vote, and don't think that anything you're going to do is going to be insignificant. Little things can make a difference. Welcome back to Rev Televised. Just wanted to thank Carl once again for, he was the one that did all those interviews that we just saw over in DC. So thank you for that. If you have any footage yourself and want to be featured in our social media, go ahead and email digital or at political-revolution.com. And we can definitely get those uploaded for you. And thanks again to anyone who participated in that march. Gun violence is, I mean, I was just checking social media during the break, and it's definitely, everyone is talking about it right now. And I think it's really important that we make our stance on this to be one of, obviously, I think the majority of the people who are speaking out against this right now, I mean, largely influenced by students, obviously are not gun owners. They can't legally own a gun, right? And then it's, so how do we convey to people who are very pro-gun ownership
that, you know, specifically what is the U.S. doing differently, right, that's allowing all of this to happen. And there's data that we can look at, there's legislation that we can look at passing, and it's really just, you know, not being able to maneuver around, I guess, the emotional response of gun ownership and like, oh, well, it's my right, right? Well, okay, well, I have a right to live like above anything else, I think. So one of the articles that I was actually reading this week, it was a really great article posted by BBC actually, and they just gathered a lot of data from like Pew polling as well as some academic research, and they published it on the 21st of March, so a few days before the March for Our Lives. And they actually started off saying by, the March for Our Lives is organized by pupils at the Marjorie Stoneman Douglas High School in Florida, where a former student is accused of killing 17 people last month. And the first thing that they look at is obviously the changing attitudes of young people in America about how they feel about gun ownership and whether we should control it or protect gun rights. And you see a very definitive trend where, you know, obviously the people who are the younger people are not pro-gun, obviously. Support for gun control over the protection of gun rights in America is highest among 18 to 29-year-olds, according to a study by the Pew Research Center. Of course, with a spike after the Orlando nightclub shooting in 2016. The overall trend suggests a slight decrease in support for gun control rights since 2000. And Pew also found that the 1/3 of over 50-year-olds said that they owned a gun. The rate of gun ownership was lower for young adults, about 28%, and white men are especially likely to own a gun. So that goes back to what I was saying before the break, that, you know, part of this is also prey to intersectionality and racial rights as well here. And the data shows it. And I think, and then also internationally, the article goes on that America is actually, well, first of all, 64% of American homicides are actually related to guns, compared to the next highest being Canada, where they have 30% of their homicides. So we go from a vast majority, over 50%, to, you know, about a third. So that's a very wide gap there from being, so we're actually the leader here. And they also look at England and Wales comparably, has 4.5% of their homicides as gun-related killings, and Australia with only 13%.
At least we're number one in something. But
that's the other thing. It's like, then this all plays into the greater message of like, make America great again. It's like, whoa, okay, well, what does that actually mean? Because make America great again does not mean put a gun in everyone's hands. Because if everyone just owned a gun, then we could just solve these things ourselves and just be like the wild, wild west, right? And it's like, whoever has
I mean, it's not even that. They're just, well, we're just, if I feel like, no, we're not subsidizing it. That's not the right word. But we're just like, here, you're losing, you know, you're not qualified to handle your own finances. There you go. Go get them. You know, go get something. Then after, with all these events that happen, you know, after every mass shooting or after every nationally televised terrorist attack, there's always a spike in gun owners, you know, in gun sales, if they ever want to release that information, because legally gun stores aren't really required to, you know, in a certain time frame. You know, because like half the time the ATF can collect it like almost years after recorded sales, so we're just missing so much. But that's unrelated to this point. You know, we're basically allowing all these issues to scaremonger us into buying even more, and a lot of the time it's people who are disabled, or it's people that can, you know, that have enough money to go buy it, because the conservative lifestyle is just like, Let's go do, let's just buy everything. What is it? What's percentage? It's that it's only a very small percentage owning more than almost half of the guns. Like owning almost half of the guns in this country. So that's that's what you showed. Like these people stockpile this, and now we're just waiting for them to go into the wrong arm. Going into the wrong hands.
Yeah. Yeah, absolutely. And that's really like that's the other argument to be made. Like I see things shared on Facebook, and Colorado is a very pro-gun state. But they say like, okay, well, what about all the gun owners that are using them correctly? Well, it's like that's besides the point, right? Because not only do we have it's the high availability of all this, right? Like, and the same thing can be said about big pharma. We see the increasing availability of medications that can be abused, like methamphetamine, heroin, the opioid crisis. All this stuff comes directly from the pharmaceutical industry. It's the same thing with gun violence. We have the next chart in the article is about looking at the top 10 civilian gun-owning countries, and of course the United States is number one in that, and we own, and that's the other thing. This plays into fear-mongering. This plays into war, us mentality. Like we build up this huge idol of fear around these other countries and the Middle East and the war in Iraq and the war against ISIS, and yet we are the top civilian gun-owning country in the world by a far margin. The second one is Yemen, with about 60 million civilian gun owners, or just under, and we are at about 270 million gun owners in America. And where do they come from, and why are so many obtained illegally, and why do so many end up in the hands of people who have emotional impetus to actually murder people, and like, why is there not a safety net for that? In some regard there has to be, as well as this also comes into gang violence as well.
The more that are on the street, the more guns that are on the streets, like that were legally purchased, eventually they're going to find their way into gangs. I come from Elizabeth. Elizabeth has a gang problem. Go to the port, go to the Elizabeth Seaport, and that's where a lot of the crime happens. You just go up one city, Newark, New Jersey. That's even more gang violence. Go to Camden, like right under Trenton, right under the state capitol. There's, these are violent places because we've allowed, like, I guess we just allowed them to carry them over from different states that don't have gun, comes to legislation in general. Right. And now you look at these places that don't have anything, and it's open game. It's open game because if you're, I guess it's like if you are allowed to do it, or if you have any type of, if there's no handicaps that stop you from doing something, you're most likely going to do it. You're mostly, because again, we're creatures of convenience. If it's convenient for me to go get a gun in Florida or to go get a gun in Mississippi, I may as well take the trip. And once HR 38 is passed, Concealed Carry Reciprocity Act, that there's that they're trying to pass in Congress, everything's open game. I can go get, I could carry it over into New Jersey with no problem. And Congress is allowing this because they're getting money from the NRA, tens, like millions of dollars.
Right,
and it's gonna.
Sorry, go on.
Oh, sorry. And the more that it's accessible, these people who are mentally disturbed, that can't handle their own, finances, as noted from the Social Security Administration. It shows that if these people are going to get it, you set them off just a little bit, and then after we play into the opioid crisis, we play into the mental health crisis because we keep defunding all these mental health things.
That's what I was gonna actually talk about.
We're gonna keep going. Yeah. I'm sorry.
I hope you don't mind if I like take you.
Oh no.
But I was actually gonna say the mass shootings are what get national attention, but actually the majority of gun violence and gun deaths are actually attributed to suicides. but the mass shootings are also like mental health related, right? Like just the act of homicide or suicide of the actual killing, and there's been an increase, an uptick in all of these trends. I mean, Colorado, we were like one of the first major ones with the 1999 Columbine high school shooting, and since then, or well, actually since 1982, there's been 90 mass shootings in the U.S. And this demand, like this society that we're living in, is fomenting all of this. Honestly, the high demand, the pressure. I just watched a Netflix documentary actually on. It's called Take Your Pills, and it's about how more people are using Adderall, which of course is an amphetamine, or as many people are using it now as they were in like the 1960s, and actually we're seeing an increasing trend of adults using it as like a performance enhancing stimulant. And so that goes hand in hand with this increase in gun violence. It goes hand in hand with the decrease in education, with the the staggering of the middle class, and like people can't look at all these things. Well, it's not that they can, it's that's what we're fighting for, right? We're fighting for the bigger picture of like, okay, let's look at all of these things and see how they're connected, right?
Yeah, and they all have a correlation to each other.
Right. It's all connected to this high demand, high materialism society, viewing things as objects, I think, and then we view people as objects, as capital to be used as a marketing scheme or like a way to attain an end, really, and that should never be the case. That people's lives are at stake, I think. We have to be able to protect people from capital and the idea of capital, and protect human capital as something that is inherent, or that life, liberty, and the pursuit of happiness, right? I almost feel like in that regard, like some aspects of capitalism are unconstitutional. Like, can we make that argument? Like, if capitalism requires that people are reduced to an object so you can make money off of them, then that's kind of against the pursuit of happiness right there a little bit.
I mean, you are fighting for your private enterprise. You're fighting for your capital, and so I guess you are fighting for your own happiness. When it comes to the monetary thing, it's unfortunate that you're taking down you're taking down people, during your own pursuit, right. which does contradict a lot.
That's the thing. That's part of the government's purpose in the first place, is to protect people from that. And so we need much more of a balance on the side of people of socialistic values. The data shows it. The people are saying it. If you have millions of people, if you have one of the biggest single-day protests in history, that's not. I don't know. I think I think people who are so gun ownership. I mean, I would hope that people are so gun ownership that they're willing to overlook these, facts, right? Like, these are facts that we're stating at the end of the day.
I mean, we already have people talking about alternative facts as the real thing, so I don't know. But yeah, I'm sorry for cutting you off there.
No, it's fine. I was gonna say there's also an uptick in trend of how deadly these are becoming. So we had starting with Columbine, Colorado, there was in 1999 there was 13 deaths, and then one of the latest ones in Las Vegas, Nevada, there was 58 deaths. And I think this trend is just going to continue as weapons get deadlier, as people, if we continue to have these guns be accessible and not address that issue, it's just going to keep continuing the trend, and the people are saying enough is enough.
Yeah, definitely. There's nothing. Let's see. I'm sorry. There's. The more we continue advancing these weapons, because again, when the Second Amendment was created, this was when muskets either had, that it takes you more than a minute to reload a single shot, or it's the or if you did get hit with a musket bullet, it was the infection that took you out, right after, not the bullet itself in most cases. And now, these are meant to these weapons are meant for, to mow down your enemies within a short period of time and a quick reload in war. And once you translate that into angsty people, or people who are mentally disabled, or people who are on a watch list, what do you think is going to happen? They're going to go to the quickest thing, because again, we're creatures of convenience. If I can go down Main Street, go to Walmart, or I guess before Dick's Sporting Goods, and get an AR, AR with no problem, put a bump stock on it, and then go down my class, take down my classmates or anyone or people that I don't feel is correct, that's already a red flag to begin with. There's a reason we don't see this in the northern states, or in blue states, I guess let's call it, because there is some kind of regulation. You don't see it in Congress because the NRA funds all them. The NRA funds Joe Manchin. So even then, if we had a majority, we already have Democrats that are still screwing us over.
Yeah. We gotta vote those out. I've been kind of disappointed in that most recent FOSTA vote, and the other one to repeal parts of the Dodd-Frank, and we saw Republicans voting that, and Debbie Stabenow. The Michigan, I'm so glad I left Michigan. Debbie Stabenow and Gary Peters are they're just always on the wrong side of things.
Yeah, they directly get money from these people. Who else? Who's the one in North Dakota? Heidi Heitkamp?
Yeah, probably.
Yeah. You're directly getting money from these people. And on live TV, on on Congress, on House, in the Senate chamber website, watching that roll call vote, I guess infuriated me even more. And I was at the budget hearing, during the budget committee when we were doing Senate 699 and Senate 700 for immigration. When it comes to undocumented college tuition in the state of New Jersey, they voted for a tax cut the same day, almost unanimously, because for the movie industry, because one of the Republican senators which were sitting there, his wife is an actress. So so there's so much conflicts of interest going on, and the movie lobby was there, the MPAA people, and it's unfortunate that unions joined into this too. I think we're all very pro-union here, but it's unfortunate when we see them lobbying against, I guess, everyone else's interests. Yeah, and it doesn't help us. We're voting for all these tax cuts, and I'm not surprised when the Senate soon enough, once this all dies down, and I hope it doesn't, that that the Senate's probably going to vote for another tax cut for these arms manufacturers.
Yeah, at least the trend is there's another poll by Gallup that showed that currently 46% of Americans, there has been an uptick in the trend of being dissatisfied with gun laws and wanting stricter laws. Gallup's been running this poll since 2001, and they just ran it for 2018, and currently 46% of the people they polled do want stricter laws, compared to 39% that are satisfied. So yeah, I think even some more conservative people, and there are gun owners. We just had James Thompson on the podcast last week, or tried to, and he's a gun owner, but he was he's wanting to definitely control guns so we can have safer environment for kids, for everyone. And then public opinion is the most divided currently over the concealed carry policy. There was another poll, or some of the control in the same Gallup poll. And there was a 50-50 split on for Democrats and Republicans preventing the mentally ill from purchasing guns, so that an equal amount of people who from both Democrats and Republicans want to prevent the mentally ill from actually purchasing guns, but then For the concealed carry, Democrats are more leaning against that, whereas Republicans, of course, are for allowing the concealed carry. But we're seeing that while there's divides in like specific areas of gun policy, there's actually parts of gun policy where Democrats and Republicans are agreeing on. Democrats and Republicans are also both agree to bar gun purchase by putting people on no-fly or watch lists. So there's ways that people can put together gun legislation and come forward to the American people at the federal level, but like we've been saying, the reason that that's not happening is because of the NRA gun lobby. I'd like to see but I'd like to see that pushed more at the federal level. The other argument is that it needs to happen at the state level, and that currently there's a congressional stipulation that would prevent the federal government from placing a ban on assault weapons. But I just remember hearing that. I don't know if that's accurate. I don't have a source.
No, you're allowed to.
You
can. Yeah, it's even worse if we look at the history of the NRA.
Mm-hmm.
That up until the 60s, 70s, the Reagan era, they were in support of gun control. They were in support of basic stuff like this. They advocated for the 1936 gun, like one of the first gun control laws in this country. They advocated for. Now you get to the 60s when the Koch brothers when they started working on their libertarian style of things. When they started getting their industries up and ready with Reagan. With their own, with the Libertarian Party, you start seeing the divide, like where they start converting to being anti-everything. Now, fast forward to the 1994 assault weapons ban, which I think Dianne Feinstein did.
Mm-hmm.
And that's at the point where they were vehemently against it, and that's when the courts started rolling back on what they used to say, because they started suing again. And the court said that you were allowed to do gun regulations. Throughout history, we've had these trials numerous times where they said that the federal government is allowed to regulate guns, and it's to regulate firearms. Because again, this is not an issue that's meant to the states, because it's been addressed in the Constitution. Let's wave it around one more time. No, but but it's been addressed in the Constitution so many times that the federal government is supposed to do something about this. But until we get any money out, we can't do anything. Unfortunately, we're gonna have to see even more bodies on the floor, going down. Where I have to eventually, hopefully, not see my classmates having to be at their funeral because someone opened fire at school.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah, so it's all the money. And this carries into the healthcare debate. This carries into banking, etc.
Yep. The NRA, unsurprisingly, has been spending increasingly more and more money on anti-gun control measures. They were only spending around 2000 about $1.5 million on their lobbying budget, and now they're up to over $3.5 million. And I don't know. I just go back to my global discussion of there's some aspect of capitalism that I feel like that we can put a global stop around. Definitely Citizens United, but then going a step further and saying if capital involves human life, these procedures must be followed, and apply it to the pharmaceutical industry, insurance company, Medicare for all, of course, is going to be a big factor in that. Maybe I guess the ultimate argument is do we prevent capital from happening, or do we just make more social programs available to create a basis for comfort and actual viability to be able to live? So I guess this is my thought for the day.
Yeah, no, and you're right, because we're supposed to have there's supposed to be a balance with industry. Because if you have a fully privatized industry, we're not going to get healthcare. We're not going to have many of the things we have already.
Mm-hmm.
We're supposed to have, the government is here to regulate and ensure that during a changing time, you know, with the generations changing, with everything, with new things coming every day, the government is there to make sure that, hey, let's make sure the people, you know, people don't get screwed over. That's why, what is it? There's certain industries that the government has to deal with, you know, explicitly, and not private industry, because they already know once you start exploiting that, you know, people are going to get screwed. You know, this is why, you know, this is why people don't go around wielding nukes everywhere or trying to lobby to have, you know, people having nukes, because that's what the government deals with. Now I'm not saying that, you know, we shouldn't be regulating these weapons. But if there's already one of the most deadliest weapons in this, you know, like that we've ever seen to come to fruition is regulated by the government, why can't something that is used in war, that's something that's used, that's designed to take out people within a short period of time, you know, and to, you know, again, during conflicts like the Middle East, how is that not how can we not regulate that? If I'm regulated every inch of my life to get health care, if I had to, God forbid, you know, God forbid I had to go to the hospital one day or anything, how am I more regulated than in me purchasing a weapon?
Mm-hmm.
Yeah. You know, how is social welfare the biggest issue in this country? Because apparently people that don't do anything are getting it, despite the fact that that it shows otherwise.
Mm-hmm.
That fraud is less than 2%. You know, that's been found.
Mm-hmm.
So, but we disregard things that are meant to kill.
Yeah.
Yeah, that showed no other purpose. It's insanity.
Yeah. With that, I want to kind of taper off the discussion, and I think it's like close to 7 Eastern, and we've got to jump off here and I think do a meeting or something. But wanted to just highlight Bernie. We're going to start following Bernie as he's campaigning around, and he'll be speaking at J Street at a J Street's conference in mid-April. The date hasn't been released yet. And the conversation that he and Reverend Barber were to have at Duke has been rescheduled to April 19th. And he will be at a book expo in Manhattan on May 31st. And it should be covered by C-SPAN. So, yeah, I actually got that from a Reddit user, LEU2500. He puts out some pretty good updates. So kudos for that. Just want to recap again. We've got elections on April 3rd, and we do actually have Ankur Patel on grassrootspb.com, so you can phone bank for him, as well as Dennis Kucinich, and his election is on May 8th. So we've got a little bit of time, but he is on there. And we also have Paula Jean Spurgeon on May 8th as well. So definitely jump on and phone bank for them. Jump in the Slack and Discord and hang out with us if you haven't. And yeah, I think that's all from me. Have a great week, everyone. And thanks for watching if you've been watching our stream. All right. Goodbye, everyone.